And welcome back to Janky AF and Year of the Aerostar, episode number 126. I don't even know where to begin. It's been way too long. This is the third part of a trifecta of beautiful vintage manual transmission Aerostars that I meant to complete over a month ago at this point. And what did John Lennon say? Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. I am in an undisclosed location, which we'll get to in a minute. I'll give you a slight idea of where I am. And I'm here under very somber circumstances. There's been a loss in the family. I won't really get into details for privacy's sake, but the small, slight silver lining is that we have had to travel. And in fact, I find myself in the spiritual home of the Ford Aerostar. And for those of you who don't know where that is, I am in the city of St. Louis. Of course, the Ford Aerostar is the true spirit of St. Louis, as all 2 million plus Aerostars were made in the Hazelwood manufacturing factory, Hazelwood Assembly Factory, I believe it was called, just outside of St. Louis. I believe it's still in St. Louis County. Now, I've not gone to Hazelwood. It's just a parking lot now because it was the factory was shut down, I think maybe demolished too. And, you know, a lot of the production went to Mexico, other places. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day, which it would be interesting to get into the history of the Hazelwood factory. All that is to say that I couldn't leave the city. I'm probably leaving tomorrow without shooting an episode in St. Louis, the spiritual home of the Ford Aerostar. I'm hoping to do maybe a little bit of a St. Louis residency. Usually I'm not actually in the place I'm doing the residency. It's sort of a virtual residency. I don't know if I'll have time to record more episodes. Life has been very crazy. You'll notice generally on Janky AF we have not been releasing a lot of episodes, and that's just because there's been so much going on. But if anyone's still out there, and yet the subscriber count keeps going up, we're getting very close to 1,000 subscribers, which of course I've been saying for a long time, but this is a slow and steady channel here. So Janky do thanky to everyone out there. I haven't responded to comments in a long time. I will try to catch up on all the comments. Maybe you can see a little Milo in the background there. Looks like he's got a little allergies going on. He's had life on the road with him too. We drove out in 2 days in my, sadly not in an Aerostar. That would have been maybe a bridge too far for this particular trip, as speed of was the essence. So, but you know, so that's just a little background, a little context, a little exposition, tell you what's going on, but it is nice to be able to finally shoot this episode, finish off this trifecta of beautiful arrows. And then, sorry about the distraction, then, you know, we'll march forward towards a whole new chapter of Year of the Aerostar and do some really great ones for you. So, I have updates on my Aerostars and blah, blah, blah. But let's talk about this beautiful van, okay? So, without further ado, here we have a 1988 Ford Aerostar. I knew I was going to be rusty. A 1988 Ford Aerostar Passenger XL, listed in Chazy, New York, or Chazy, New York. Now, as a lifelong resident of the state of New York, I have no idea where Chazy or Chazy is. And I think I think everybody just got home here, so we may have to cut to a commercial break at some point. But if that's the case, you'll just get to see some sweet vintage Aerostar footage. Okay. About this vehicle, driven 155,084 miles, nothing for a Ford Aerostar. Of course, a manual transmission, an exterior color of blue, and an interior color of blue. And as you'll see, it's quite a striking shade of blue too. This is a one-owner vehicle, so it claims, and the fuel type is gasoline, and it is paid off. As with all cars from 1998, I hope they are paid off, except unless it's like a Countach or something, and you're buying it on finance, because that's like $1 million car now. Neither here nor there. We're talking about Aerostars. And honestly, more of a value than a Countach at this point in time, I'd say. So let's take a look at this very briefly and give you a sweet picture before we read the description. Right off the bat, you'll notice a lot of great details and elements going on here. A roof rack, some rain guards. It almost looks black, but I think it is a really dark blue, which shows in some other pictures a little bit more. But this doesn't look like the normal dark navy blue that's appeared on a lot of Aerostars, right up in the whole run, I think. Maybe the last couple years they didn't have them, but it's one of those colors, rare colors, that was in earlier and later Aerostars. But this is like I don't think it's a repaint, but just a really dark midnight blue that I've never seen before, and I really like. We do have some very nice white and red pinstriping, the little flourishes and accents here. And of course, this great bug guard. We have some pins on the hood, which is very interesting. And it looks like, your normal radio antenna and another antenna, but we'll get to that in a bit. So, seller's description. 1988 Ford Aerostar XL, 5-speed manual, 6-cylinder. Stored every winter, never exposed to salt, one owner until last year prior to me. Runs good, regular maintenance. Passed inspection, 8,000 or best offer, no trades, exclamation point. Too bad for me because I could have offered a trade. Now, of course, this Aerostar has been bought and sold a long time ago. It's interesting to me that the second owner of this vehicle, I guess, bought it and then sold it so quickly, and now after it has a new owner, it'll be a 3-owner. Maybe it was a flip. They just sort of found it in an estate sale or something. Who knows? But that being said, it seems like it's still in pretty stellar condition. If we look really closely, we can see some dings and dents and little rust spots. But for how old this vehicle is, I'd say pretty stunning, immaculate condition. And you can see these little lights down here, some subtle add-ons here and there, but largely stock and original, but a little bit decked out, as we'll see. It was sold a while ago, and this is like sort of an archived post. As you can see, I'm working out of preview here because I screen grabbed all these in case I wasn't able to get it to it in time, which is a good thing because it's been quite a while now since this was actually bought and sold. I like to do currently listed Aerostars, but this is hopefully an evergreen series that can serve as a calendar for all 365 days of the year plus leap year. So that's the main mission and goal of the Aerostar, as well as a critique on, marketplace language if you're new to the series or the program. That's what we're doing here. Let's get on into the other pictures. As you can see in this other shot, it looks like it's really squatted back here. Maybe it's on a little bit of an incline. You can see various bumper stickers and things of that nature. I don't know what this says. Last up, something like that. For sale sign in it. The original old style steel wheel. Now this is funny because these had a couple of different little dog dish hubcaps. These ones, the lug nuts are more exposed, and you have your famous Ford sort of cylinder here with a strike through the middle. This iconography was even used on like such things as the Ford GT. I really like it, very simple. It's Ford, but it doesn't have any Ford logo, but it's one of those if you know things. It's sort of a constant Ford thing. My Aerostar, my green 1993 Aerostar, has the little pop-in caps, and that uses sort of a red version of the same sort of iconography or logo design. I prefer that one a little bit more, but I do like the look of this one too, where you still have your lugs exposed and it still covers the center hub and gives it that little bit of aesthetic value and protection over your hub bore and all that. Certainly an older Aerostar, an early Aerostar thing. What I can't tell here is if the bumpers are quite color matched. It looks like they kind of are, and I'm wondering about the paint on this particular Aerostar. I would have to assume it's original, especially being a one owner. I'm wondering if those bumpers came like that from the factory, where they don't look like the gray bumpers, obviously, and it looks like there is a speed, little almost like your sport style lip down here, which I just saw on like a Facebook group that I think you can buy just that lip still. They still stock it, which is absolutely crazy. I think you can buy it from AutoZone online. And that looks like gray, so maybe that was added with these little lights. And this original bumper, now there were some like dark blue, almost purplish bumpers that came on some of the early Aerostars, so maybe it is one of those and it's just faded a little bit. but it matches the body color pretty darn well, I have to say. And as we go to this other picture, we'll see on the back, it's kind of the same, where it does appear to be this navy blue and work really well with the rest of the body color of the vehicle. I do love monochromatic Aerostars. I think they look fantastic. And I think, although I do like the plain gray bumpers because they evoke that sort of like contractor spec that you see people photoshopping like Porsche 911s and everything, it's become like kind of a little bit of a meme. So I think the dark gray bumpers, particularly on a white Aerostar, look great. However, I do love when the bumpers are body color matched on a two-tone, but also just on a singular color vehicle. It sort of ties the whole thing together, and you see the form of the Aerostar very purely because there's no sort of colors and lines to sort of distort the image of the singular form of the Aerostar. You have a little bit of cracking going down here on your bumper. I think that's easily repairable. Certainly, far from the worst Aerostar bumper I've seen, and the rear bumper that I took off of the second 86 Aerostar that I bought and later sold to my friend Evan, that was in worse condition than this, and I managed to sort of piece it together with Bondo and sanding and getting creative, and then I spray painted it, and now it looks really fantastic. Krylon Fusion, if you're wondering, is the product that I used on that, and it's held up very, very well. It's a very interesting roof rack. It almost looks like some sort of custom-made thing here, or maybe this is actually the factory roof rack, and they've just put some metal bolts and studs and stuff in it to raise it and then have these wooden planks on top of that. So I think that's a really, really creative solution. You're not drilling into anything, and you're not clamping anything on, but yet you still get a little bit more beefy and raised up roof rack that'll probably support larger objects like ladders and such a little bit better. So that's actually a really, really creative solution that I myself may employ one day. Really appreciate that. Let's look at the inside of the vehicle a little bit. Okay, this is an 88. So this is a first pre-facelift interior, we'll call it. Very janky looking. I mean, this is so 80s. It really was a monumental step up in, I believe, 92 when they went to the post facelift interior, second gen interior, whatever you want to call it. I hate to say I prefer the second gen interior because there's something very pure and very 80s about the early Aerostars, but I do love that within this singular form, it did evolve along the way. And my 93, which I was daily driving for a time when my Prius went down, and I really enjoyed that. I talked about that a little bit on My Janky Life. It was really great to drive, and the second gen interior, we'll call it, it just has a little bit, it just looks like a little bit better put together, shall I say. Still an analog speedometer. I have yet to acquire an Aerostar with a digital speedometer, digital gauge cluster. But of course, and I've talked about this many times, there's something about the first gen. I mean, you know, this plastic sheath here that goes over the, you know, just a little protection over the actual dials and gauges. It's very analog. It looks very cool. It's lit up with these bright colors, which I really like. Of course, you have your kilometers per hour in a shade of light blue. All your gauges, which if they're working, that's fantastic. You actually have a little bit more, I guess it's really the same. It's the same 4 gauges in the later Aerostar. They're just displayed a little bit differently. I've talked about this many times, how I love that the speedometer will turn yellow and then red when the speeds you're reaching are extreme and or dangerous, and that extremeness and danger starts at only 55 miles per hour. Maybe that's more of a fuel consumption thing. I don't know. And obviously in the 80s, 55 was like the national speed limit. It was this big deal. It was when they tried briefly to convert over to kilometers per hour. And it was with the fuel shortage and all that, the vestiges of like the 70s and early 80s. You know, 55 miles an hour was sort of a benchmark back then. Now I feel like if you're cruising on the highway, nobody's going less than 75 miles an hour, which in an Aerostar would be considered dangerous, judging by the red color, which we all know the red-orange, or the yellow-orange-red sort of color system of warnings. And the hotter you get from yellow to orange, the more, you know, extreme or dangerous it is. So it's just one of those things from 80s vehicles. I mean, this is, you know, the Aerostar was developed as far back as the late 70s. So by the mid 80s, you still have that era going on, and it's a sign of the times to show that vehicles were just so much different back then. And now, like, if you have a Chevy Suburban or a crossover vehicle, they're tighter, they're quieter, all the weather seals are better. The tires and wheels are much bigger. The Aerostar only has 14-inch wheels and tires. So particularly these early Aerostars, and you can just see all these plastic buttons. Now, yeah, you could say they're cheaply made, but to me, they just evoke this time. And you still have all these toggle switches and dials. It's very tactile. And so the cheapness of the materials to me is outshined so far just by the aesthetics and the sort of time capsule nature than the tactile experience that this vehicle provides. Of course, here, now I wish I could read this. I don't know what it says. Oh, I think it says something, lack of planning by you does not institute an emergency for me, which is hilarious. And speaking of the 80s, I mean, this faux wood grain with white sort of embossed or cut out lettering. I mean, every single office building or college dormitory or college library that you've ever seen usually has some sort of plaques and like this on it. And it's funny, wood paneling in buildings, in homes, all these things that, and it's a good microcosm for the Aerostar itself, because all these things were such a dime a dozen back in the day. They were so ubiquitous, and it just shows you how, as time changes, things just wash away and they're forgotten about. And I'm trying really hard not to get into a metaphor for like loss and losing people right now. But, there's a certain self-indulgent, nostalgic nature in buying older vehicles. And was the vehicle really ever that good? Or was it always a piece of crap and you're just remembering it fondly because it brings you back to a time and place that was younger, more pure, more innocent? Personally, yeah, I think there is a lot of nostalgia in buying older vehicles. However, remembering things from the past, aside from trauma and things like that, I think to carry on stories and carry on legacies and carry on memories and bring them into the future is an incredibly important thing. And it's very, very humbling. It's like we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, and as technology evolves and people come and go, it's easy to just move on to the next thing, the next shiny object, and forget where we came from and how we got here. And that involves a lot of pain and a lot of wrong decisions that people have to sort of live through and get over and come to terms with, reconcile with, make amends for. However, I think it is very important to look back and see how far you've come and remember people and things and times in your life that made you who you are. So I'll try not to stay on the soapbox too long, but I think buying older cars does have a lot of value and a lot of meaning for people, aside from the fact that nowadays with sort of embedded, I forget the exact term, the embedded energy cost of building new things, like there's a lot of arguments out there that buying an older car is actually the most ecologically responsible thing you can do, because even though you might not be getting 60 miles a gallon or the equivalent with like a battery pack, you're buying something that there was no embedded energy cost in creating, because it was already there and you're simply recycling it, upcycling it, reusing it, rehabbing it, nurturing it back into life. And particularly just as like a second vehicle, like a little runaround vehicle or a just-in-case vehicle, an emergency vehicle, which is how I was using my green Aerostar in the previous weeks, is very, very valuable. And on top of that, the cherry on the cake, the icing on top, is that you get to sort of relive this experience and you get to see how cars were made back in this time period. And I think that's very valuable too, because it can make you appreciate even like a humdrum car nowadays. You see the level of fit and finish and the features. And, sometimes those features can actually be, I don't know about less reliable, but more finicky, especially with the technological stuff, as these older vehicles. So if you can work on them yourself, or you can find a mechanic who's willing to work on them, they can actually be made to be very trustworthy, reliable vehicles. And it's sort of like that analog digital divide, where digital has a lot of advantages. However, when digital goes wrong, sometimes it can be harder to fix than when analog goes wrong. A lot of times when analog goes wrong, there's a pretty straightforward solution to fixing it. Now, you might need to put some sweat equity into it, but the roadmap to making it work and work reliably sometimes can be a little bit more straightforward. As we see this beautiful tape deck in here, this is like the real basic tape deck, but it does have like a little bit of a, not quite, I wouldn't call this an equalizer, but it does have, you know, again, tactile knobs to adjust your bass and your treble and your balance and all that. A tape deck, I love a tape deck. I've been getting into tapes a lot more recently. It really is one of the best forms. I don't think a tape can, you know, get scratched or damaged as easily as a CD. You can argue that they're a little bit easier to store. And so I was listening to tapes in my 93 Aerostar, and so I really love this. I also always make a comment about these early Aerostar stereo systems because no matter, I think even when new, they didn't fit well in this panel here. It was just like, you know, the panel gaps and molding issues and imprecision of these early Aerostars in particular, I think is nothing but charming and gives the car just that extra little bit of jank, which I really appreciate. Again, with these Aerostars, any interior, no matter what color it is, all the materials are never quite the same color. So whether it's tan or blue or red, like you see, you know, this navy blue on the dashboard is slightly different than this navy blue on the carpeting, and slightly different than the navy blue on these mats, and even then your light blue or gray piping that goes around it. All these little like attention to details here are very cool. This shift knob, as you can see, oh, I don't know what happened there. I guess I swiped through that image. We'll go back to that real briefly. I guess I could show you the next one. And we'll go back here. This shift knob is slightly different than the one I have on my 86. I believe the Mazda transmission was updated slightly, so there were actually technically two different Mazda transmissions offered in these manual transmissions. And it apparently came in pretty early. It might just be 86 and 87 that have, it's more of a square shift knob, and there's a little bit of a kink in the shifter, and it's not as thick, not as girthy as this one. So I've always wanted one that has this, I guess, you know, more modern style shift lever just to feel what it's like. Obviously, fifth gear is your overdrive gear. I don't point this out too often, but a lot of manual transmission cars, even some sports cars from the 80s, or 4-speeds. So a 5-speed transmission was actually quite advanced thing. Even the C4 Corvettes, when they came out, I think until 1990, had like this Doug Nash 4.4+3 transmission. I still haven't had anybody explain to me how exactly that worked, but I think like, you know, 2 through 4 had like an overdrive gear, almost like in like a tractor trailer where there was like these sort of like double gears. All that is to say, it was still a 4-speed. So the Aerostar, you know, the manual transmission Aerostar in 1986 had more gears and therefore more sort of like options for revving and power bands than a Corvette at the time, which at the time was a very technologically advanced car. So I always find that to be funny. Okay, another thing here is that we have a vinyl interior. Now the white Aerostar with the tan interior that we did, I think in episode 124, 125, it was interesting to me because I'd never seen a passenger Aerostar with a full cargo interior. Now my buddy Evan's 86 that I sold him, that also has these blue vinyl seats, which I absolutely love. And I think these are also sort of like a bucket style seat, also very much like a sports car. We like to compare the Aerostar to a sports car because in its purest form, it was a manual transmission rear wheel drive vehicle, just like a Mazda Miata. But he doesn't have any, his has been like somewhat converted to a cargo, even though it does have the lift gate and not the barn doors. But the bench seat, the vinyl bench seat was a really rare thing and really cool to see in this Aerostar. And I think someone just told me, and I'm sorry, I forget who, that I believe you could order these without a rear bench seat. So even though this is technically missing the bench seat, it might not be missing at all. I think a lot of these only came with one bench seat. You know, 86, 87, 88, the first 3 years of the Aerostar, it was like a quite different vehicle than in your 95, 97, your last 3 years of the Aerostar, when it was already slated for discontinuation. They kept kind of soldiering on, mainly because people just really liked them and wanted them to be continued to be manufactured, which they were right here in St. Louis. So I think the bench seat is awesome, and it's cool because the pattern and design is a little bit different. Like with the cloth, you had all this piping, and the material was different. It was like a two-tone, but I like how whenever they stitched these together, they still kept this top section, this wide top section. So it mimics the stitching pattern sort of the cloth seats, even though you have a little bit more stripes and stuff here. And obviously it's just one single color and fabric, not two like in the cloth interiors. So that's a really cool thing. I guess that's all we have. Again, I didn't even remember what pictures I had of this vehicle, but a pretty good set. You know, anytime we can get a couple pictures of the interior and the exterior together, I'm happy. And I think it does do this van justice. I mean, the paintwork, you know, the more you zoom in, that looks to be in fairly good quality. A little bit of, you know, scuffing, and maybe it was jacked up on the wrong place a couple times, but that red pinstripe on the blue van, really, really do like. And I think there was one thing that I wanted to point out here that I didn't, and I'm wondering where that picture is. Did I miss it? In one of these pictures here, I thought I saw, oh, Lord have mercy. We're rough here. Okay, it's actually the first one. I apologize for the rust here. Bear with me. We have, of course, a CB radio. And as I was pointing out in the first picture of the exterior, we have this extra antenna here. So this is, I mean, like peak 80s here. We have the CB radio. You're cruising along, shifting gears, talking. You know, just as the Aerostar can act as like a sports car, it can also act as like a semi-truck. And that is like maybe a crystallization of the true, unbelievably versatile nature of the Ford Aerostar. One of the many reasons why I'm in love with the Ford Aerostar, because it can be a long-haul trucker and it can be, you know, a dynamic sports car. And does it do those things as well as sort of the far end of the extremity spectrum of those things? No, it's not a Mazda Miata, and no, it's not a semi-tractor trailer. But it's a very interesting thought exercise in how can we make a car that is sort of everything all at the same time. And there are inherent compromises when you do that. However, there are inherent compromises in any vehicle, I would argue. And so just to see the CB radio in there was really, really funny and cool. I like the way it's mounted up top like that. And certainly a little bonus if you were to buy this vehicle. They don't really mention it in the description, but I thought that was an excellent addition to this 1988 Ford Aerostar. I'm slurring my words. Passenger XL. Probably need to drink some water. It's been a long couple of days. It's been a long couple of weeks here at Janky AF. We thank you so much for those of you who have hung in with us. And again, I will answer all your comments. I'm very, very sorry that I have not been able to get to those. However, we have had, you know, like I said, a loss in the family. We've also had an addition to the family, which, again, personal and private, but that was just another whole weird revolutionary sort of life, you know, imitating art and art imitating life, and death and rebirth and growth and the changing seasons and all those, you know, organic things that fly around the sun on this planet that we are all comprised of. The stardust, if you will, the aero stardust that make up this crazy, crazy world that we live in. And I'm just so happy that of all the instantiations of life, of all the innumerable people and objects and thoughts and ideas and creations that have occurred in this universe we live in, one of them happens to be something called the Ford Aerostar. It's a vehicle that I take a lot of inspiration from, and I have an incredible amount of affection for. And why? People tell me they still haven't quite figured out what my deal with the Ford Aerostar is. I think the evidence is, you know, there's hours and hours of me talking about it now, so hopefully I've come to some sort of conclusion. But that's you know, the true answer to that question is blowing in the wind, as Bob Dylan said. So there you have it. I'm waxing poetic now and you know, ranging into perhaps some pretentious territory, but that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with pretentiousness. If pretentiousness is just heightening something to a significance that is more than it should be, then I would just argue that the Aerostar in terms of me talking about it pretentiously. I'm actually just trying to bring it up to an equal level. I'm trying to get it the respect that it deserves. I see so many Ford Aerostar enthusiasts out there in these Facebook groups talking about their Aerostars. There's people with many, many Aerostars in their possession. So many experts out there just voluntarily giving all this free advice to people to try to keep theirs on the road. And it's a beautiful, beautiful community, and only fitting for such a beautiful, beautiful van, car, truck, vehicle, whatever it may be. Defying description. Okay. I have meandered and blathered on quite long enough, but I got to shoot an episode in St. Louis, and so maybe we'll be back one day. Who knows? If you are ever in St. Louis, by the way, check out the Botanical Gardens. Incredibly peaceful, lovely space to occupy for a little while, especially if you're going through something of a difficult time, or if you're in a celebratory mood too. It checks all the boxes, much like the Ford Aerostar. Okay, that's my last little connection I'll make there. All right, take care of yourselves out there. Try to appreciate what you got while you got it. And if you're lucky enough to see a Ford Aerostar flash across your path while you're on your journeys, give it a salute. And if you're lucky enough to own a Ford Aerostar or be in the possession of one or the tutelage or the caretaking of one, go out there and drive it and have some fun. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Year of the Aerostar here on Janky AF. It's been few and far between, but I promise we will have another one coming very soon for you. And until then, Janky do thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.